Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm delighted and honored to be asked to speak to you, and I will talk, as you can see on this picture, about the brief history and recent work of the European Group on Ethics, and put it in a European perspective, and also discuss some global challenges that is facing our group and all of us. So this is the menu. I'll begin with a few words about the varieties of bioethics, and then I'll go through the list here, talk about EGE, recent changes in our work, and overview of the work that we have done, and then talk about current challenges, and finish by a few words about a distinctive European approach to bioethics with a question mark afterwards. And to make sure that every one of you can pick up as much as possible of my special version of English, I've taken down a lot on the slides so that you can follow what I'm trying to convey. Now, the first thing is, do not generalize about bioethics. And the reason is simple. There are considerable variations between and within bioethics, and this applies to bioethics research, bioethics teaching, and bioethics committees. So it's very difficult to say something that's both true and general about bioethics. And one of the reasons for this is that there are many different underlying concepts and conceptions of ethics. Now, ethical problems, as I understand them in a wide sense, presuppose conflicts of interest. And this approach invites us to think not only about which interests, but also about whose interests are at stake. And then these interests can be further specified in terms of values, rights, or possibly other things. And the clashes can, depending on the issues, have to do with conflicts between different values, as the figure indicates: integrity, commitment, truth, but also, of course, other values and other conflicts are at stake, and you will see a little bit more about that. Now, a few words about concepts of ethics. You're all familiar with the distinction between descriptive and normative ethics. What is right and what is good, what is considered to be right, what is considered to be good. These are different questions, obviously. Normative ethics is concerned with rights, liberties, duties, and their foundation or basis, whereas descriptive ethics essentially describes and analyzes practices, values, norms in different societies at different times. There is another distinction which I think is more important and less discussed than the distinction between normative and descriptive ethics, and that is what I would call the distinction between practical and theoretical ethics. Now, the purpose of practical ethics, obviously, is to propose and argue for decisions on controversial ethical issues, whereas theoretical ethics is mainly concerned with clarification, exploring logical and semantical relations, promoting understanding of the key concepts used and the relations between the arguments used for and against various contested positions. So studies of Kant's different concepts of duty, for example, would be theoretical ethics, or the study of the relation between the precautionary principle and other principles would also be an example of theoretical ethics, whereas studies of particular concrete issues in stem cell research, nanomedicine, would be practical issues. And there are different forms of practical ethics, and they all have in common that they use a certain normative framework chosen as a point of departure. It could be a utilitarian or a Kantian or something else. And the objective of the work is to reach or recommend a decision concerning what to do. And one of these forms is monodisciplinary and philosophical, and the other is interdisciplinary and requires cooperation of different experts. Peter Singer's books, for example, illustrate one of these. I mean, he's a philosopher. He writes about research on embryos using a utilitarian framework, arguing for certain positions. Whereas the EGE, the Nuffield Council, and many other represent the other approach. And whatever you start with, different points of departure can be chosen. Now, I have also written about ethics committees, and the point I want to make, again, to underline the danger of generalizing, is that there are many different sorts of ethics committees. Their functions and tasks are different. One, as you see in the left part of the slide, is to facilitate and stimulate debates and reflections. So you present background material, you give an overview of problems, positions and arguments with this in mind. Other committees have the function to give advice. Most, if not all, national and international ethics committees, including the EGE, the Nuffield Council, and many others, have this function. Not just to facilitate debate or stimulate debate, but to give specific advice. Then there are ethics committees who make decisions in the way that research ethics committees in my country and I'm sure in some other countries as well do. And of course, these different functions have implications for the composition and the competence required. Now, how did EGE start and which are its predecessors? The first group of advisors to the European Commission started in 1991. In November 1991, the European Commission, under the then President Jacques Delors, set up the group of advisors on the ethical implications of biotechnology. And the purpose was to incorporate ethics in the decision-making process of community research and technological development. And then the European Group of Ethics replaced this first group. In December 1997, the Commission set up the European Group on Ethics, and the remit was then not limited to modern biotechnology. It was widened to science and new technologies, and the members were increased to 12, and some new disciplines were added to the competences represented in the group. Then, in the 1997 decision, some further changes were made. This decision provided that the EGE could examine subjects suggested to the Commission by the European Parliament or the Council, and also take up subjects on its own initiative. And then, of course, in 1998, Santer was replaced by Prodi, and later came Barroso, as you all know. And in May 2005, the mandate was revised again. The members increased from 12 to 15, and this increase of members allowed a wider range of competencies to be represented around the table. For example, competencies concerning food safety and security, IT and things like that. And the new membership also reflected the enlarged European Union. We had members from Hungary, for example. Now, this is in telegraphic form, the brief history. Now I will say a few words about some recent changes in the working methods and the ethical points of departure. Now, important changes. I've been a member for a long time, and so I have witnessed some of these changes, and we have all been aware of the pandemics, the global financial crisis, the fate of the Lisbon Treaty. There have always also been important developments in the sciences, nanotechnologies, stem cell research, genetics, information technology, bioinformatics. I mean, many new developments have taken place and also presented European society with some new challenges. I mean, every new technology makes certain things possible that could not be made with previous technologies, but they also raise some new challenges. And the ethical implications of these new developments in science are debated worldwide, and a need for global governance has been advocated. So that is the background and the context. And of course, these changes that I have outlined have had relevance for the work of the group in several ways. First of all, the scope of the reports have been widened from focusing almost exclusively on issues raised by new trends in biomedical research and biotechnology to much wider issues, including, for example, cloning of animals for food purposes, no patients involved, and novel methods and techniques used in farming, which also raises a number of more global issues related to trade and patentability and other things. I'll come back to that. Now, in broadening the topics in this way, a strict European perspective cannot be maintained. Issues of agriculture, food security, social justice also involve global, economic, demographic, political aspects which cannot be neglected. TRIPS, WTO and others organizations have, and their work have to be taken into account. The EGE has also launched the International Bioethics Dialogue, which is funded by the Bureau of Policy Advisors and is meeting on a yearly basis. And the report from the second International Bioethics Dialogue is just out. Now, this has also relevance for the work of the EGE in a third way, because the normative framework used in the reports have changed. Not dramatically, but slowly and subtly. From using more or less traditional principles in bioethics to a framework rooted in theories of human rights. And of course, in this wider focus, when you take up issues of with global implications, then human rights become prominent and is, in a way, a very natural point of departure. Now, the principle of human dignity is something that can be interpreted in many ways. And in one interpretation, it is the basis of all rights. In another interpretation, it is just a useless concept. As you know, it's a bone of contention how to understand this. And it is in Article 1 of the Oviedo Convention, so it has some standing in some of these international declarations. And it's rooted in Kantian philosophy. Because humans have dignity, they have rights. That's one way of looking at it. And this is a quote from a description of human dignity. The main point is that human dignity is not contingent upon any functional capacities, which may vary in degree. So the possession of human dignity carries certain immutable moral obligations, including, for example, concerning the treatments of all other human beings, the duty to preserve life, liberty, and the security of persons, and concerning animals and nature, responsibilities of stewardship. Now, I will say a few words about the EGE work between 2005 and 2010 and its impact. Something is happening here. All right. This has been described recently in the General Activity Report, which was published a few months ago. And it gives an account of our work during the current mandate. And this report has some interesting features which distinguishes it from previous General Activity Reports of the EGE. And it addresses, for example, issues related to the role ethics will play in the new constitutional setting of the European Union. And it makes an assessment of how the European Union has taken action in fields covered by EGE opinions. Now, in the first part of this report, we present and discuss the role of ethics in the European Union. And here the political vision of the European Union as a community of values is explored. And in particular, the Charter of Fundamental Rights and the Lisbon Treaty. As you know, that has now been accepted by all member states, which means that it will now get a different standing and play a much more important role in the future. The Berlin Declaration pointed to the need for establishing a new dimension in the EU that is based on shared values. And to the right, you see a quote from the Berlin Declaration. EU countries are striving for peace and freedom, for democracy and the rule of law, for mutual respect and shared responsibility, for prosperity and security, for tolerance and participation, for justice and solidarity. Now, this is all good and well. I mean, the widespread acceptance by ethical concepts as the founding principles of the European Union is encouraging.